for coming. So we've got 25 people already, which is very exciting. So I'm Elliot James Garcia. You may know me from the previous webinars, but if you're tuning into our first one, welcome. I'm a researcher at IFPRI, specializing in digital extension, but now more into the AI part. And we've been running this series since the May, I think was the first one. And then we took a break for the summer. So welcome back, everybody who was there before, and welcome to the new people as well. So today we're going to be talking about ethics, and we're going to, specifically this principles to practice, with the idea that we have a problem-oriented approach. We're going to look at how we can move beyond high-level principles to practical approaches for using AI responsibly in food systems. We're delighted to have two excellent speakers with us. So we have Carolina Iglesias Martin, researcher and consultant on ethical AI and digital inclusiveness at IFPRI, and Berta Ortiz Crespo, user experience design specialist at the Alliance of Biodiversity International and CIAT. Together, they'll share their perspectives on the grounding AI ethics in real-world challenges and solutions. Please do post questions throughout, and we'll come to them in about half an hour. And apart from that, please enjoy. I've got Jessica Light online as well, who's my co-curator at IFPRI, and she'll pop up if anything goes wrong, as I'm in Nairobi and a little bit worried about my internet connection. But thanks very much, and I'll hand it over to you, Carolina.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I'll try to share my screen first. Let's see if this works. I believe that you're now in my screen. Yeah, perfect, Elliot. Thank you so much for your time and interest in this topic. My name is Carolina Iglesias Martins, and as Elliot mentioned, I've been working with IFPRI in terms of ethical AI and digital inclusiveness. And one of the things, this session, just giving the intro also to Bertha, we planned this session in a way that we can have a little bit of theory, which is important, and then Bertha will showcase a practical case. So we hope that we can combine and answer questions. And one of the things that we discussed is that we cannot have practice without having a little bit of theory, right? So that is what we'll be talking about. Of course, that the topic of this session is around AI ethics, but we cannot talk about AI ethics without discussing data ethics, right? There's no AI without data. So we're going essentially to have a brief look on what is the difference and what is the overlap between these two concepts, as well how does data and AI have a real impact in the world. So it's more, my part will be a little bit more on bringing awareness in where the decisions that we're making, how do they shape and impact the world? And then we go to principal ethical challenges. And of course, this is a world, there's no way that we can address everything in around 10 to 15 minutes. So bear with me if it sometimes looks simplification. It's not simple, but let's try to make this a little bit accessible to everyone and then spark a discussion. So when we're talking about AI and ethics and data, it's like ethical dilemmas everywhere. So I always like to bring this meme because it really showcases, it's like, here you have the technology, and then all of us are like, oh my God, ethical dilemmas everywhere. But how do we unpack this? So when we're talking about AI ethics, we need to understand that they have several components that build into each other. So as I mentioned, everything starts with foundational theories and principles. And in this case, I would say that like philosophy and philosophy of technology is really important for us to try to understand what are we talking about when we start to use certain terms in our conversations and our discussions. For example, the concept of fairness, the concept of justice, what is moral. So those are all like concepts that there's no right or wrong answer. But we need to have a discussion, and it should be made on foundational theories. And only after we have an agreement or kind of like a preliminary consensus, then we can go and build some guidelines and framework, and then it goes to the top up of the pyramid, which is the practical implementation. So right now we're going to look at the foundational theories and principles, but essentially, the argument that I bring here is that sometimes when we talk about ethics, we talk AI ethics and data ethics, and it is not a matter of this or that, right? They're not mutually exclusive. They're actually mutually inclusive. So it is AI ethics and data ethics. So when we're talking about certain concepts, we need to understand where in these two dimensions do they fall. Of course, that they do overlap, but we need to have a clear idea what are we really talking about when we talk about AI ethics, because we use AI ethics as a very broad term, but sometimes things are related with data ethics. So on the AI ethics portion, let me see if I can just put my laser pointer. AI ethics, we talk about the concepts of the fairness of the model, right? So if we're talking about artificial intelligence that has different related technologies into it that try to simulate or mimic human behavior, we need to understand, okay, is that behavior fair? Is that behavior transparent? And can we provide explainability behind the behavior? So I believe that all of you are familiar with the terms of black boxes, right? So black box is when we don't know what is causing a specific behavior or a specific output. So transparency and explainability, and also accountability. We cannot have behavior without being accountable by that behavior. So when we're talking about AI ethics, where does the responsibility and the accountability of the outcomes or outputs of these models and these technologies, who is responsible by them? And on the other side, when we're talking about data ethics, then we talk about privacy, the privacy of this data, the consent, right? The bias that exists underlying the data that we have in the model. I'm not seeing the chat, so I'm not sure if I can answer at the same time. But Elliot, if you feel something is really important to highlight or bring, please do it. So in terms of data, anything relevant for this stage that you would like to share? Or we address everything at the end?
No, carry on. It's there's something else.
Okay.
It's at the end.
Okay, thanks. So in terms of consent, right? So for example, in the beginning of the session, I don't know if they're still there, but it came this AI note taker. So that is an ethical question around consent and around privacy. Although it feeds into a solution, right? It is also based on the data that is gathering. And the data, we can say that the state of the world is already biased, right? But we need to take that into consideration. How can we remove or reduce the bias in the data that we have to allow our solutions, AI solutions, to be more fair, and also use limitation and protection? So now I really want to focus. I know this is small. I hope that you can see it, but the point that I want to make here is when we are developing a solution, an AI solution, which relies in data, it has indirect effects in society. So let's try to understand where those indirect effects impact society. So the first thing that we start is when we have a problem that we want to solve, right? We start with reality. We take a look at what is the state of the world. And when we choose a goal or we choose a problem, we're already making a decision. So everything starts in the first part on what do we want to solve and how will we be capturing this state of the world. Then once we have an objective, a goal, or a problem, right, we're going to choose a mechanism in which we want to solve that problem. And we're going to learn about that problem. And all of these feeds into each other, of course, is not that linear. There are feedback loops here. But the main thing is when we go from reality to measuring, we are simplifying that reality. And here's where I want to bring the first awareness point, which is when we choose which data we're going to collect, the mechanisms, right? How we're going to measure reality, this simplification already comes with ethical questions. Now, Bertha will, I believe she will address this in the second stage, which is, okay, this is really nice, but how do we solve this? Once again, no easy solutions, no one fits all. But once we understand that the simplification that we're making will have implications both in the solution and its indirect effects in society, we start making decisions more carefully, right? And we start weighting better the pros and the cons, and then we need to compromise. So moving to the next step in development, after we make these decisions, now we collect the data, we need to structure and encode the data, which is a form of representation of reality. And once again, the way that we're going to structure the data, either structure, unstructured, quantitative, qualitative, is going to have, once again, implications. So once we have that data and that representation and we encode, then we go to the next stage. Well, now you have more automated ways to do, but usually you prepare the data, you need to label, you need to annotate, you need to clean, you need to do some feature engineering, right? What are the features that we want to choose? What are going to be the pipelines? How is the data going to flow? So the preparation also brings ethical challenges. And if we look back in the beginning, in which we have AI ethics and fairness, explainability, and the data in terms of consent and privacy, we start to look at the questions in a different light. And this is, I would say, the first step to build solutions that are more responsible, that are more equitable, right? And are more ethical, okay? And once again, the decisions made around the data, the data preparation, the labeling will influence how are we going to train the model and what are the rules that we're going to define, right? So in this case, every solution that we make, either on the model that we'll be using, what is the training data set, what is the model training, has implications, right? And as you can see, this is kind of a cascade effect. Although we have a feedback loop back to representation in data, there is still decisions here. And this is where it gets interesting, because as we move along, then we go, let me just move this here. Then, sorry, everyone, I'm trying to, okay, perfect. Once we have our model trained and once we start kind of like on a staging and testing, then we have, and the validation here, evaluation and validation of the metric, of the model and the solution, we have direct effects, and this is like the iterative cycle of going, seeing how it is performing, going back to the training model, and this is contained, right? And one important thing that I really want to highlight is the decisions that we make as developers around the performance metrics are going to be really important, because we're going to evaluate the performance and the results of the model or the solution based on its performance, right? And we all know that we can choose how we're going to measure performance. So one of the important things when we're talking about AI ethics and data ethics, we really need to be courageous in the sense that we sometimes need to understand that the outputs or the performance is leading to unintended consequences. And that is something that we need to be mindful. So this is where we go to the outcome. The issue when you go from validation to outcome is that, as I mentioned, usually the validation is in a contained environment. So once we deploy to the real world, we're going to have users that will influence the product. But the issue is that most of the times we don't consider how the decisions have an impact in the long term. So this is the indirect effects on reality. I'm 100% positive, or 99.9% positive, that you can relate with what I'm saying. But a great example that is outside of our use cases here at CG level is, for example, social media, right? Over time, there's becoming this polarization in terms of public opinion, especially because of this interaction here. It's having long-term consequences that the developers or the institutions that deployed products never came to. And that, once again, shapes reality and shapes society. So this is the main idea that I want to have, and I want to get to the end so Bertha also can present her amazing work. So when we're talking about challenges, okay, now that we are aware that our decisions in every step of the process, every action implies a decision that it implies consequences. What are the challenges here? So just to organize a little bit information and provide a visual, we have challenges related with informational integrity, right? Ground truth, the bias in the data, how we're going to normalize or not overfit our models. What is the limits of intellectual property? We also have misinformations and hallucinations in terms of the output of these solutions. Then we also have, in terms, the algorithms that are used, right? So in this case, the challenges related with algorithmic responsibility are bias, once again, the words of accountability, transparency, explainability, precision versus accuracy, right? These are two, might seem similar terms, but they measure different things. So this falls into the algorithm responsibility. And then we have legal and social equity, which relates with the legal frameworks and regulations. Everything is changing really, really fast. Also discrimination, job displacement, privacy protection, and legal liability. And then we have other ethical challenges, which is, I really like to focus on this one of anthropomorphization, right? It's how we try to humanize these solutions, and that also brings challenges, right? So for example, in robotics, there's a line of research that evaluates, like, is it ethical to treat bad a robot or to insult a robot? So these are other ethical challenges that we have here, and I believe that that is the last point of my presentation. Thank you so much, and Bertha, over to you.
Well, thank you, Carolina. Okay, I'm going to talk about the practical examples. So last year, we started a project on developing an AI tool for farmers. And is it working? Yes. And yeah, we wanted to apply AI principles. We were quite new to this, so we were just wondering, okay, how do we do this at all? So yeah, I just want to walk you through what we did and also some of the results we got out of applying some AI related, some ethical related methods. So, okay, first I want to explain you what is the project we were working on. So, and this is a project that focuses on creating AI-powered tools that make data collection and analysis more efficient, inclusive, and scalable. So, as probably a lot of you know, gathering insights from rural communities is essential in conducting research, but it's challenging due to logistical constraints and remoteness. So here in this picture, you can see how we got stuck on a road trying to get to one of those villages. So not easy to reach at all. And there's also poor infrastructure, digital literacy gaps. So all of this makes data collection very difficult. So NDC proposes a solution to this challenge, allowing local enumerators to collect and structure audio data from farmers. And through AI tools, it's first transcribed into text and afterwards it's analyzed using LLMs. And this provides actionable insights. So during the first phase of developing this tool, we were focusing on understanding crop traits preferences from farmers in their native language, that was Swahili. And that's why you will hear me throughout the presentation talking about crop traits, because this is the example we were using. So yeah, how did we apply ethical and human-centered practices to this project? So we were following ethical principles and approaches, and yeah, this table is just an overview of what we have been doing. So we started by understanding whether the model and the outputs have added value for the users. So we did some interviews with researchers, breeders, to understand what are their needs and how AI can support them. After this, we were sitting together as a team and setting the stage, but drafting risk and mitigation strategies. So we had a focus on ethical dimensions, and we were trying to understand what could be misuse of information. How can we prevent unwanted outcomes or unwanted uses of the outputs? We were just sitting together and thinking about the different ethical dimensions and how we could mitigate those risks. Then the next step was to collect the data for model training. And here is what Carolina was talking about, simplification of reality. So this is when this happens. And we were applying data stratification techniques. So we were trying to make sure that all the relevant groups or the relevant socioeconomic groups were well represented in the data. So gender, age, economic status, different dimensions. We also use consent forms to make sure that participants know how the data will be used, and also to give them the right to decide to participate. And then the data was stored following ethical principles, preserving respondent privacy, for example. So once the data was collected, we proceed with labeling or annotation. So here humans annotate part of the collected data, and we developed annotation guidelines to minimize mislabeling of data and also to reduce bias on the annotation process. So the guidelines, we tried to be as clear as possible, providing examples of different categories, age cases. We also made sure that the annotations did not have any socioeconomic hints about the respondent. And we also re-annotated a portion of the data. So all of this was with the goal of reducing bias and mislabeling. Then during the process of model training, it's possible to apply fairness constraints to minimize disparity treatment impact on different groups, but this was not applied due to lack of resources. But what we did as a last step was to validate the outputs of the model, applying fairness metrics. So we were assessing how well the model performed across different demographic groups. And this is what I will show you in the next slides. What were the results, the preliminary results we got from this validation step? So yeah, I want to explain a bit more in detail the metrics we were assessing. So this table is an overview, and then I will go on detailing each one of them. But yeah, we look into metrics to assess fairness of data collection, and then also to assess the performance of the transcription model and the trait extraction model. So for data collection, for assessing the fairness of data collection, we looked for each demographic group into data quality. So here we were using, for quality, we were using as a proxy the number of traits, and for quantity, the number of words, the word count. So yeah, in this slide, so looking into quantity and quality, the numbers of words spoke per answer and the amount of meaningful information in the answer. Which demographic group do you think conveys the same message with less words? Like, is this men or women? I let you think in your head which one it is. But yeah, our research shows that women do. So women use less words to express the same information that men, suggesting that they are more efficient getting their message across. So this is just a fun fact we found in our data. But some other interesting things we saw is that in terms of word count, we had difference across region, gender, age, and literacy levels. So for example, men, older and literate respondents gave lengthy answers, but as I said, this doesn't mean more information. And then also that we also observe regional differences with respondents from some areas speaking more than others. In terms of assessing the transcription accuracy of the model, we used word error rate as a proxy. So this indicates whether two compared pieces of text are identical or completely different. So it's measured between 0 and 1, and 0 means identical and 1 means completely different. It's a very common metric to assess performance of models, but if it's assessed against socioeconomics, then it becomes a fairness metric. So our findings show that there are differences across regions. This can be due to accents, recording conditions, or distance into big cities. For example, we saw that the farther away from cities, the more the accuracy of the model decreases. Also gender, so women had a lower rate than men, and this suggests that men recordings were more difficult to understand. And then we also found out that the different socioeconomic factors overlap and have significant effects on the model performance, but we were not able to identify which specific group combinations are driving the difference. But this just shows that the transcription accuracy is shaped by multiple socioeconomic factors and that we need to consider them. And looking at the evaluation of the LLM model, where we were like asking it to extract information, in our case was traits. We looked at 3 different classic performance metrics, which again, if assessed against socioeconomic data, they become also fairness metrics. So we were looking at precision. This is how often the traits extracted by the model are correct. So a higher value means higher accuracy of the model. So in terms of precision, the performance was fairly consistent across groups, but we found a slightly drop for older respondents, meaning that it was less accurate for them. In terms of recall, this is another metric, is how well the model identifies relevant traits when they are actually present. And then low values means that the model is missing traits. So the model showed a significant difference for gender and age. It performed better for women and worse for older farmers. And then the last metric is F1, and this one balances precision and recall. So it shows overall model accuracy. And here, the model performs better for women than for men and worse for older farmers. So yeah, this is some of the things we saw running some metrics, like some fairness metrics. And yeah, bringing all these findings together, what do they tell us about the AI tool that we deployed in the NDC project? So like using fairness metrics has allowed us to identify critical issues to assess in terms of model performance across socioeconomic groups. So we have found out that we will need to look into gender and age carefully. And also it has allowed us to think, how do we go from here? So for example, in terms of data collection, I thought we were stratifying the sample and ensuring that each stratum was represented. The number of respondents for certain groups may not be representative, and this affects model performance. So we will make sure that we keep on collecting data from less represented groups. Then also the outputs of the model highly depend on the quality of the annotated data. So we will keep on monitoring this step to ensure the highest possible quality. And we will keep on introducing performance metrics, for example, intra-annotator agreement. So measuring that different people label the data equally. And then the team will start applying fairness constraints during model deployment, which we didn't do in the first phase. And this also, we will use all the learnings from the first phase on which things we should pay attention to. So we say, for example, age and gender, to make sure that we evaluate this during model training. But yeah, and this is just an example of a bigger truth that ethical AI is not just about technology alone, but it's about fairness, accountability, and putting human voices at the center of every system we build. So yeah, that was my presentation.
Bravo. I was hoping. Thank you very much, Bertha. Apparently, you can't do reactions on Zoom. That was amazing. Thank you, Bo. I feel like already this is going to be an incredibly good resource to turn people to for the recording in time to come. I think the way you set it up was wonderful. I have one question from Tushar in the chat, but I think I might start with my own selfishly. For Carolina. Well, maybe both. I think it relates to Tushar's. I'm very interested in this idea about anticipating harm. I think, or societal harm. And I suppose this kind of discussion is always one way to do it. But are you aware of any other kinds of like tools or concepts that people can use to sort of to put themselves in the, I can't really think of any other way to put it, but to put themselves in the shoes of the person that might be using it downstream and how that might have a ethical impact? Is that clear?
Is that for me?
I guess, Caroline, I think that would, yeah.
Okay, I can take that one. So I think that the first thing in terms of like how you can do that. So a lot of design thinking, human-centered design, like empathy maps, things like that can allow for us. But I would say that most of the times it comes from a self-awareness. I know that this is not like very practical, but it's self-awareness of our own biases, right? And we need to keep on questioning our own assumptions because our reality is distinct from the reality of the user, right? So doing roundtables between teams, bringing diversity and bringing different perspectives from a theoretical point of view, as I mentioned, from philosophy to a highly technical, right? This is where I would say that the first step comes in, but we also have to do like some personal work in terms of identifying where are my blind spots here, right? So we can only create change if we also change. So this is kind of inspirational, but I think it is a starting point. The second thing, like, how can we I think that having like ethical checks every step of the way. So I would say that a great way to move forward is having like meetings, which are ethical checks in which the team comes in and says, okay, let's do some future scenarios here, right? If we deploy this over 50 years, what are we foreseeing that can go wrong? Right? The thing is, I come from I'm not an engineer per se, so I don't code. I combine technology with social sciences, but I worked many years in a AI and data consulting firm as the COO, and I've been there since the beginning. And I was one of the shareholders. And one of the things that I saw is that we need to build fast, right? We have a problem. We need to build fast, and no one takes the time to sometimes stop. What are the implications? And sometimes it's just pausing and reflecting that will make change. And then for that, you have a lot of facilitating tools that can support that. But I would say stopping sometimes is the best thing that you can do. I don't know if that answers. Not a very like.
I like it. Really cool. I think I agree. I think eventually I've been hearing more and more recently is like people giving up on the idea that they can think of all of the things in the future, so why try? Which I think is bad. So I'm pleased that you've reiterated that. Bertha, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, we actually did also, like, we were drafting risk and mitigation strategies, right? And that's something we review from time to time. So that was exactly what Carolina was saying, sitting together and thinking like what can happen, what can go wrong here. So that also allowed for the more like technical team to gather more of a feeling of ownership on the process.
That's pretty cool. I think that's definitely a good answer to the principles to practice aspect of it, right? I think that I even went to a lab in the Netherlands where they were specifically an AI ethics lab, and the developers were annoyed that they had to do all of the ethical stuff. They really don't like it. That feeds quite nicely into Tushar's question though. So, but beyond these steps that you've highlighted, how do we think about accountability if something still goes wrong despite following them? I guess maybe Karina can start again. That makes
Okay, this is a very interesting question. So accountability, there's it depends on the perspective. I would say that it depends a little bit on what type of approach or perspective are we looking on, right? But because we can have a micro accountability, and I had a lot of like discussions around this. So when developing a model, if a model does something, let's use an example of autonomous vehicles, just to be very extreme, right? If we have a car that drives alone and mistakes a person, like does something and kills a person, who is responsible, right? Who is going to be the responsible here? And the line is not, it's not black and white, it's very, very gray. But I would say that in terms of accountability, all starts with having the awareness that we all have an impact on the solution that we're designing, right? It comes both from the development team, the people that are writing the code, the people that are reviewing the code. Everyone has a little bit of responsibility. So I would say that following on what Bertha mentioned, having a sense of ownership also brings the responsibility. And in terms of accountability, well, if we know that we're not just building for the sake of building, but we're building with guidelines and principles and doing the right thing, of course mistakes are going to happen, and that is how we learn. But sometimes I'm going to go back to that stage, which is slowing down can allow us, and also defining, okay, I'm writing this part, this comes from here. So documentation is also very important. Bertha.
Yeah, I agree. It's and sometimes you don't foresee, you don't think about it at all. Like I work with AI that is applied for identifying diseases in plants. You know, nobody thinks like what's going to happen here. Like it's harmless. We are just working with plants. But I think it's good to, yeah, accountability comes together with doing the exercise of thinking what can go wrong. And yeah, you cannot foresee what can go wrong fully, but think about who of us are responsible as a team of this. Very important.
thanks. Yeah, I think there's something like iterative, right? And you kind of have your with all the human-centered design stuff. The idea is you go in cycles and you get the opportunity to think about these things again, right? It's like you haven't. Maybe Carolina wants to add.
Yeah, I want to add one thing. The example that Bertha gave also remind me about a tool that is about productivity, wheat productivity. And one of the consequences that people didn't foresee, and governments have responsibility and need to be accountable as well, because they also most of the times put like very specific guidelines in terms of public policy, and then research goes along and solutions go along that. But in this case, one of the things that they didn't foresee is that, okay, if we are expanding wheat in a specific geographical area, in terms of nutrition, right, we're going to have monocrops and less diverse nutrition for the communities that are there. And that also has economic impacts. So once again, bringing all of these different areas of society together, trying to understand, okay, what are the pros and the cons, is really important, right? And I said, and I'll reiterate again, that it is also a compromise, and sometimes like not the best decisions, but I would say that public entities also have responsibility and accountability here.
Great, thanks. No, I agree. I think that links almost to Tushar's next question, but I'll come back to that in a minute. Ryan's put, this presentation began with the idea that AI ethics overlaps a lot with data ethics. What specifically is the difference about AI that goes beyond research ethics, human subject research, that the CG works through all the time? Anyone want to jump in on that one?
Bertha, do you want to go first on this one?
I'm thinking like.
Me too. This is an interesting question.
Does it go beyond research ethics? Yes and no. I think it's more to me like AI, it's about making predictions, right? It's about filling gaps somehow. And while classic research is like, you just look at the data you have and you see what it's telling you, right? Like so that's where I see that ethics needs to be slightly different. But I think, Carolina, you do have a better perspective on this than me.
Yeah. Well, this is a question that, from my perspective, it would require some clarification questions. But however, one of the things that is happening right now is how AI, because it's like mimicking human behavior, that is like the goal. It starts to make decisions. And one of the things here is, I would say, is related with human agency, right? Or we either augmenting the human role or decreasing the human role. And I would say that the point in which we have AI systems making decisions automatically, another example is, for example, in terms of AI unsupervised learning, right? Although it might have human touch points there, it's still giving this, how do you say, breadth of action. So I would say, I don't know how to answer this question, but one of the things around agency of AI models to start making predictions and making decisions based on those predictions, right, is something that is really, really important. And for example, AI ethics, one of the big examples that we can, okay, there are two things that I'm thinking right now. So in terms of examples, for example, loans and credits, having AI systems being able to approve or disapprove credits or microloans, this is something that, for me, it's a little bit different in terms of research ethics or human subject research and whatnot. So that is one thing. And the other thing is also, when we're talking that AI is based on data ethics, although we try to anonymize it, it becomes easy to identify people if we combine different elements together. And AI nowadays, they have more power and more reasoning to do that. So that brings different questions that I don't think exists previously. But Bertha, do you want to add? I don't know if I replied correctly, but at least this is my take on that.
Nothing to add, Bertha?
No. Ryan, if there is something we missed, let us know.
I hope perhaps I can help with this one. I think, well, first thing is, in maybe any day now, we're going to be releasing our kind of ethics inclusion toolkit that we've developed. So I think you can look at that with some of the answers to these questions. But in that, I tried to answer something along this in the ways that the roles that CGIAR scientists will end up inevitably playing in the AI space. Either around ethics and things that we do, how you use AI, like we're talking about now in our research, but also in a sense that what are the impact, well, the data from the research that we do is going to end up being fed into an AI or something like that. It'll be secondary. And how do you manage privacy and consent as it's reused internally, right? This kind of thing. it opens huge doors and unforeseeables, I suppose. Yeah, I don't know if either of you, Caroline or Roberta, want to say anything in respect to that.
Oh, I think we need to figure out that, because it's, yeah, we need to sit together and think about that, because yeah, that's something I've been questioning a lot, like how much data do we put, that it's like, do we follow fair principles to start with? Do we, like, it's yeah, there's too many questions around that.
But then, like, fair, right? You know how fair is always used, findable, accessible, whatever. So that's considered fair, right? But how is it fair if, like, that data is then used to identify somebody later further down the line? It's kind of the ethical question I think is quite scary. Like, if you combined it with something else that would then make it, yeah. I think there's kind of a tension or a normative question there in terms of like what should opening access or whatever.
And Elliot, sorry, just to add to that, that is exactly the point. So when I was saying that even if we anonymize, there's this great book, I then can share the reference that talks about an example related with health. So even if the data of the patients were anonymized or retracted or protected, it was really possible to know that a certain person was having a higher, it was a smoker, which had a higher probability of lung cancer, and that leads to something related with the health insurance, and that can be disapproved. So yeah, that it goes aligns with what you were saying, Elliot. Yeah.
Right. And then now I think I'm tying this in quite nicely to Tushar's next question. So he says, it's an interesting perspective. My only concern is that if responsibility is shared too broadly, it sometimes ends up meaning no one is directly accountable. And I think I just want to add like a kind of thing around that is like governance is obviously an issue, right? Beyond kind of ethical standards, like there should be repercussions for what happens and kind of and we have some people coming to do some discussions about that in future. But I think it kind of speaks a little bit to the beginning of the conversation when we were talking about like retroactive solutions versus prevention. And I wondered if you might want to reflect on that a little.
Bertha, anything that you want to add? Can I go? One of the things that I personally think it is important. So when we're dealing with especially AI models, and Bertha mentioned some parameters, which is like around AI quality, let's say, right? The quality of the model, precision, recall, whatever the metrics are. My personal point of view is that when we're developing AI solutions, we should have an independent QA stream that falls outside of ethics, has a component of ethics, yes, but a third party that does the quality assurance both on what is the assumption of the problem, what is the problem, was the problem well. So it's kind of like analyzing the entire process since the inception through the development and the shipment or deployment of the solution. And this independent QA stream, depending on what are the governance policies that Elliot mentioned, can create specific accountability, right? Who are the people accountable? However, things are moving so fast that although in terms of legislation, standardization, normalization, how you ever want to call it, it's always going to be a step behind. There's no way that we can foresee. And these are very deep questions. Once again, going back to the autonomous vehicles, if they kill someone, who is responsible? Is the person that was coding? But that person that was coding maybe was a junior that was just following orders by the middle management that needs to. So it's still, I would say, it's a very, very important discussion. Not my area, I would say, but a very important discussion, and we're still in the inception. What I would say is that in terms of accountability, at the end of the day, the organization or a company or institution that is launching a product based on AI is responsible, especially if they don't have governance policies and specific guidelines and a top-down like enforcement of that, of ethical principles across the organization. And that is a high-level responsibility, I would say.
Great. Do you have anything to add to that, Berta? Or I can ask, I think I have a question for you as well.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Well, I was thinking, yeah, I think the example you shared was really good. And I'm very happy, I think Karen is online, who is from Farm Radio International, who we've been working with in similar with this kind of voice tech, ASR. And it hadn't even occurred to me that perhaps the thing would perform better with some people than others. I don't understand why it hadn't occurred to me, because I'm usually quite conscious of these things. But you have quite a clear pathway for fixing that, right? In resampling. And I suppose next time you'll try and do that earlier. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's allows you to of course it's things that you implement constantly, right? It allows you to see where you drafting what is missing, so you can like adjust your sampling strategy. You can yeah, you can change a little bit what you're measuring. Like, of course, for example, for socioeconomic dimensions, we look at some, but not all of them. Like we look at like 10 dimensions, because that you have to start somewhere, right? So it could be we are missing something else that is even more of a driver of bias. So yeah, for me, it's like very iterative process. And it's about constantly just, yeah.
I'm getting distracted by the AI telling us about what's the meeting point. Do you want to respond to Ryan's comment, Carolina? Shall I read it quickly?
Yeah.
Ryan said, thanks. It seems to me AI ethics intersects a lot with other ethical fields that are well developed, like bioethics, potentially human subjects research. The new issue seems that unique really is agency making decisions or advising a decision to the extent people just take it without much thought. For enhanced predictability for surface anticipated personally identifiable info, seems like data ethics should be able to work through that. Go ahead.
Yeah. And I said great point, and I was writing down. So for the first part of your comment, Brian, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Is that this reminds me of an interesting story, which is Compass. Compass, I don't know if you know, so Compass is a kind of a proprietary solution in the US legal system that predicts the risk of people to reoffend, right? So they kind of like analyzes if the person that is being the person that is coming out and going to liberty, if they have a high risk or a low risk of reoffending. And this is used by the judge in terms of trial. The main thing that comes out of research around this topic is how we are all developing what we call automatic bias, meaning that we now believe that the outputs that come from these solutions are smarter than we are. And a good example, we don't need to go to Compass to talk about that. For example, Google Maps or Waze. Probably we know most of the times what is the right way to drive around the city. But oh, if Waze is telling me to go to the left, I'll go to the left and I don't question. So yes, that relates with agency. And I also think it relates with digital literacy and the ability of, once again, we putting the brakes and thinking, how much am I relying on this technology? And that becoming technology or AI dependent is also a very big thing. Nowadays, if we don't have internet, how are we going to work? So we kind of need to always keep questioning our own interactions with technology. And that way we can produce better solutions for others, I would say. Yeah. But that is a great point.
Fantastic, thank you. Do you want to say anything else, Berta? I can wrap up.
No, go ahead, wrapping up.
Okay, cool.
I just have one thing to say. Sorry, Elliot. I love how the notes are putting all action items to Berta. No.
Oh yeah.
Action items.
I realized that they're just to us though.
I was just seeing my name everywhere. It's like, why me?
Yeah, I have a lot of items.
All the work's on both. I mean, there's unfairness there, right? They haven't distributed the work properly.
Exactly.
Okay, well, yeah. Thanks so much for both of you for coming. It was absolutely extremely enlightening. I'm very excited to next time somebody asks me a question to tell them to come watch this video. And yeah, Hayes, automated bias in the AI note. I won't say anything other than please. Oh no, here we are. Please sign up for the next webinar. So I think it will touch on these questions. I'll share the link in the chat quickly. But we're expecting a guest speaker called Evangelia Berdu, who reached out to me before after the first webinar, out of interest in talking about this topic. And so, yeah, and our own Ruth, who is now a research fellow emeritus, and they're going to be talking about making AI in qualitative research. I think this has a lot to do with questions of fairness but also the expertise of researchers and what their value continues to be. I hope I'm sharing my screen. Didn't ask if I wasn't or not. Okay, good. But in that case, yeah, thank you very much for coming. Thank you to our speakers, and see you in a couple of weeks if you join for the next call. Cheers.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.